Up next is Jess, actually. Jess has been doing some work in Washington State with Panthera on cougars. I'll leave it up to him to explain a bit more.
I hope that you all have been enjoying this half as much as I have, because that would be a very high level of enjoyment. And I was thinking earlier, and I was talking about how I tend to sometimes get sappy at these kinds of presentations, talking to a room full of my heroes. And then I was thinking about how Claire was saying that she was feeling like an imposter. And now not only am I presenting a use case of EarthRanger about work that's happening in the field that I'm fortunate enough to be tangentially involved with, but also following Gorongosa, which is just unreal. For those of you who aren't familiar, Gorongosa is one of the most incredible conservation stories in history, and in my opinion, and I strongly encourage you all, if you're not familiar with it, to go watch one of the very many documentaries and incredible pieces that have been put together about it. So that said, shifting gears. So although now I tend to spend most of my time supporting other members of the team and working with folks like yourselves out in the field on what EarthRanger can be doing, you might have guessed, based on the way that I dress and my general really smooth social presentation, that I was formerly an engineer. And so, much to the chagrin of the EarthRanger engineering team, I do try to stay involved to some capacity at any given time. I try to take at least one technical project that I have going on. And for the past really year, this has really kind of blossomed. That project has been the Panthera Puma program in Washington State. So the Panthera program, their Puma program in Washington, they are studying mountain lions, cougars, pumas. They go by a lot of different names. But what they're looking at is the way that they call them cougars in Washington, the way cougars are interacting with other, bipedal inhabitants of the land, how they are surviving in the landscape, how their population is doing, how their genetics are doing. And the major problem is that in northwestern Washington, there's the Olympic Peninsula with the Olympic Mountain Range. In central Washington is the Cascade Mountain Range. The Cascade Mountain Range is more of the connectivity south, but also they contain populations of cougars in both locations. And about 50 years ago, I guess, the I-5 interstate was built through Washington, which basically cut off the Olympic Peninsula cougars from the Cascade Mountain cougars, thus forming what's more or less a genetic island in the Olympic Peninsula, where all of these cougars have been stuck. And so Panthera has been studying those cougars to understand how they move through the landscape, how they interact, the impact that I-5 has had on them and other major roads, in order to propose interventions, whether that's in the form of underpasses or overpasses, to reconnect the landscapes. So this is in partnership with the Washington Department of Transportation, but perhaps even more meaningfully and certainly a lot, very interestingly, it's also in partnership with 6 of the First Nations tribes who make up that area of the northern Olympic Peninsula. And so, although Panthera is organizing the program, it's actually the First Nations tribes who are going out and conducting all of the actual field research, bringing that information back, and then Panthera is coordinating, consolidating, and analyzing those data. So the challenge, I'm sorry, I should also give 99% of the credit to the folks at Panthera that I'm directly working with, who are Reed, who is a field technician with Panthera, and Mark Elbrock, who is the lead scientist for this program. So the problem that they're dealing with is that they have a lot of tracked cougars. Sorry, the problem from looking at it from the engineering perspective, is that they have a lot of tracked cougars with a lot of data that they're trying to understand in near real time. So they have 28 tracked cougars active right now. That has been over the past few years up to 40 or 50 of them, I believe, reporting every 2 to 3 hours. And what they're trying to understand from these data, and somewhat similar to some of the presentations that we've heard earlier today, is when you have just this massive track, what information intelligence can we actually pull out of those track data to get at something more meaningful that they can then go prioritize for study. And so the way that they have done this in the past, and the approach that we have automated, is through cluster analysis and generation. So if we take a look at a cougar's track that they're moving around all back and forth throughout the landscape, where are they spending a lot of time? Where are they returning to? Where does the data that's coming from the track suggest that something interesting is happening, so that they can then send their researchers, the First Nation tribes researchers, out to investigate these spots to better understand the cougar behavior there. And the things that they're looking for are dens, kill sites, beds, things like that. And for each one of these sites, they then go investigate and take a look at the surrounding vegetation or what kill was, so that they can better understand the interaction between the animal in the landscape and the other animals in the landscapes. So this used to be a process that they would do manually once a week or once every few weeks. And we have automated this so that when new data come in from tracking callers, it's now automatically generating these clusters of where cougars have spent a lot of time. So it does that in both space and time. So if a cougar has spent a lot of time in one, like within a certain radius of a given position, or if it's a spot that they keep coming back to, then that's something that we automatically flag as being a cluster of potential interest. That's happening all the time. And then once a day, we then send an email to all of the researchers, and I forget the exact number, but like 30 or 40 of them in all of the tribes, with all of the interesting things that were detected in the prior day. So these are all the spots that we think that there might be something interesting to go check out. We here are also all of the existing spots that we had previously identified that now it looks like there's additional points there, as well as here are points that we had previously identified but haven't been visited yet. And so these need to get visited before they time out so that we don't fill up the queue. We also include GPX files of the clusters themselves, as well as all the raw data of all the cougar tracks in all of these emails. It's also then synchronized to an application called OnX. I don't honestly know if that's used much in Africa, but I didn't personally know much about it myself. Its most common use in the United States is for hunters. And what's unique about it is that it has a lot of map data for land ownership. And so if you are a hunter and you're looking to hunt a deer or whatever, you know if you're on private land or not. And they use it in kind of the same way, except they need to know if they're on private land tracking cougars or if they're on public land, which is why they use this app. So we've integrated EarthRanger into OnX. And so as these clusters are generated, it also gets pushed into OnX, which is then a mobile app that their researchers can take into the field, and they can go investigate these clusters, and they have those data available to them offline. And it's all color coded according to 10,000 different parameters about what we think was detected there. They then go out and they investigate those clusters using CyberTracker. So they'll hike, and Jordan was telling the story earlier about our tagging along for one of these missions. I can tell you, those of you that work in savanna landscapes, you're very lucky. These hills are just unbelievable, trudging through mud, and the ground is so wet that if you try to push on a tree to not fall over, the tree will fall over because it doesn't have enough purchase in the dirt. It was brutal, a lot of fun, but brutal. Fun for me. I imagine it's not as much fun if you're doing that all day, every day. But they then go out and investigate these clusters. They have a cluster ID that was generated, which is from the EarthRanger report number. They can enter that into their form in CyberTracker as the first element, and then they fill out the rest of the information. So what was the vegetation like? What was found there? As soon as that's submitted, that then goes back into EarthRanger, and it's automatically associated with the original cluster that was generated. So that then forms a incident for those of you that are familiar with those in EarthRanger. And so that then associates the detected cluster with what was then found when they investigated it. It then marks that as resolved, takes it off the to-do list. And that way the researchers all have basically an active checklist that they can work off of. They also use Geofences, which help manage their relationships with their partners. So I mentioned all of those tribes. There's also different types of reservations, different types of boundaries, whether that's national park or state park. So the geofences alert them if cougars are moving into different types of land so that they know who to contact and who to respond with. And then they've also used the proximity sensors that we originally actually developed for Snow Leopard Trust. But these are alerting them if two tracked cougars are getting within a close proximity to each other, which suggests other types of events are occurring. And actually, it's really cool to see that we first turned those on maybe 4-ish months ago, and then shortly thereafter got one of these proximity alerts, which then later led to, then later we got a cluster alert 3 months to the day later for one of the cougars that was involved in the proximity alert. And so they went to go research that cluster and found 4 cougar cubs. So we weren't setting out to do this, but we can actually predict cougar cubs. So I just wanted to share that use case with you. The actual data then and the analysis that's happening on all of the clusters that they're visiting. I don't want to preempt any sort of papers or presentations that they're making about it, but I wanted to share the use case because I thought it was a great example of EarthRanger pulling in all of these various pieces, from data integration with callers to field data collection to operational checklists, basically workflow management, and with very specific real world application. So any questions about that? All right. A couple things I'll add. One is that there's actually nothing in this that's specific to cougars from a technical perspective. So this would work just as well for any other type of tracked, not really tracked anything, but any sort of tracked animal. So if anyone's interested.